Whether the team is giving us the highest of highs or the blues of blues, we'll cover it all here on Commanders Nightly News. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So the Commanders reunited with an old friend. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to edge rusher Preston Smith, who was drafted here in 2015 in the second round, spent 4 years of his career here, 2015 to 2018, had some big moments, none probably bigger than the Cowboys game in which he forced a fumble, or if I'm not mistaken, recovered the fumble, forced by Ryan Kerrigan. I think Kerrigan forced it. He recovered it in the end zone. The Cowboys went down to kick a field goal to tie the game up. They missed. We won the game, and that was the go-ahead score in that game. So Preston Smith, a.k.a. P. Boogie, a guy that we all thought was a solid player. We used to always say no one, tallied the pressure quite like Preston Smith. Didn't always get to the quarterback, but he always could generate a pressure. He was among the the highest pressure rates in the NFL when he was here in Washington. It just never, ever amounted to sacks, it felt like. But that said, he was brought on board after a workout on Tuesday. He was signed. He was on the practice field today. I expect Preston Smith to play in as many as 20 snaps on Sunday. He'll play anywhere, in my mind, from 10 to 20 snaps just to get his feet wet. I expect him to take over the starting role on the defensive line. As a matter of fact, let's take a look at the official press release, because there was a corresponding move that happened with the Preston Smith signing. And that move was cornerback Jonathan Jones being placed on the injured reserve list. Now, this was not the season-ending IR list, but rather the 4-week IR, reserve list. So it's the interim short-term IR. This is a big blow to the defense, because now the first time you see an injury, the general is on the field. And we know that while he's insurance, we call him the general for a reason. So Jonathan Jones is out, and that means that you're probably going to see someone like Antonio Hamilton Sr. be brought up on game day and activated either on Saturday or Sunday against the Raiders in week 3, and probably moving forward the remainder of that IR stint for Jonathan Jones, assuming that nothing else goes wrong with the position. Meanwhile, Preston Smith will take Jones's spot on the active roster, and I expect him to be a guy that immediately jumps into the fray and has an impact. And again, I don't think it's going to be long before he's starting. Speaking of which, a brand new depth chart was released for the contest going into week 3 against the Raiders. So this is the way the new Deppy looks. Now, everything hasn't been updated to fit the new moves that have been made. This was put out on Monday. So you're not going to see, for instance, Jonathan Jones no longer being on this thing, because that news just came out officially today, even though we got wind of it yesterday. So Jonathan Jones, as you can see, is still up there. Let's look at the offense first. Nothing has changed on the offensive side of the football. It says Nick Allegretti or Andrew Wiley. We talked about that already. We're going to talk about something that DQ said at his press conference, because it could lead to them potentially making a switch on the offensive line. But everything looks to be in working order here on the offense. Noah Brown is still listed as your wide receiver on the outside opposite of Terry McLaurin. But as we know, he's dealing with a groin injury. We got an update today. We'll talk about that. So obviously there's some things that are subject to change there. As you can see, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is the big one here. He's now moved into the starting running back role. Remember, the last time we saw this, going into week 1, he was still listed as I think he was still listed as the 4th running back on the depth chart, which none of us believed that, right? But Eck was your starting running back. Now with Eck out of the picture, unfortunately, due to his Achilles injury, Bill has stepped in to the running back role as the starter. And as you can see, McNichols is there, Chris Rodriguez is there. And I'm assuming that the next time we see this, Chase Edmonds will be added to this list potentially as well. Again, he's on the practice squad, and he may just remain a practice squatter all year, that they move up, protect him every week, etc. We'll see. But that's the big one on the offensive side. Defensively, as you can see, Javonte Jean-Baptiste steps into the starting defensive end role opposite of Dorrance Armstrong to fill in the void left by Deatrich Wise. Also, Jalen Holmes was not on the 53-man roster, was on the practice squad. He has been added as depth as Javonte Jean-Baptiste has moved into the starting lineup. Someone had to take his place. Jalen Holmes has done that. And so that's what you see there as a big change in terms of the defensive side of the football. Nothing else really sticks out other than Jonathan Jones being your primary backup for the two positions at corner, but obviously he's out with injury. So think of it in your mind as Noah Igbenogany's name being down on that list 3 times in a row, behind Mike Sainristil, behind Trey Amos, behind Marshawn Lattimore. If anything were to happen to any of those guys, the first guy you're going to see on the field is the general. Everything else looks to be in working order. And what we got confirmation on is that Debo's going to be back there on kickoffs, right? We speculated. I talked about, well, maybe Debo only will be out there week 1 or for a couple of them, and then no. Debo's going to be out there receiving kickoffs throughout the season. He may not get everyone. We've seen Luke McCaffrey return a few kickoffs, and they may switch off from here and there, right? Especially at the end of the beginning of the game, if the Commanders lose the toss and you have to receive at the beginning of the game, you're going to see Debo back there. You're going to always see him if we win the toss and we receive to start the second half. He's going to be back there like he was against Green Bay. I think those are times where you're definitely going to see him back there throughout the course of the game. You may not see him go back there after a score by the opposition. Maybe Luke McCaffrey and, someone else back there. But Debo's going to be back there for the vast majority of those kickoff returns this season. I think that's something that we also should be able to feel comfortable with now after seeing the first 2 weeks of the season. So obviously getting Preston Smith back in here is huge. DQ talked about them having conversations about Preston Smith for a very long time because of his versatility. He fits that Deatrich Wise, stout defensive end, physicality, versatile guy that can, rotate inside if need be, because Preston Smith has that same 200 and, I think Deatrich Wise was 280, 285. He's a little bit bigger probably than Preston Smith, who's probably going to be somewhere in that 270, 75, 280 range. He's somewhere in that neighborhood. So he's still going to be that physical, stout presence at defensive end. He's got more of a pass rushing profile than that of Deatrich Wise. But again, at his age now, at age 32, how much juice does he have actually left to get to the quarterback? The Steelers didn't get a lot out of him last year after trading for him. So I don't know if he has that much to give as a pass rusher, but he can definitely still be stout at the point of attack. And, all this time off, he's got fresh legs. Hopefully he comes in here and can give this defense a spark. But if nothing else, be a part of this unit, this group that can stop the run and be physical up front. That is all we really require of him. And I think by next week, week 4, heading into that Atlanta Falcons contest, I expect him to be ready to take starters reps from Javonte Jean-Baptiste. JJB may start this particular game. I don't love it. I don't want to see him starting very much longer. And I don't think I will have to. But I think Preston Smith is long for that starting role, and I don't think it's going to take him very long to assume that role either. They brought him in here to play, not to be a spectator, and I think he's going to be starting along. And they had time. This is the beauty of playing on a Thursday. They had time to assess everything, and Javonte Jean-Baptiste is not a guy that you want out there taking starter reps, and I think they understand that, which is why they moved so swiftly and went out and got Preston Smith, and I expect Preston to play right away and have an impact this Sunday against the Vegas Raiders in week number 3. Let's get to in other news, where we heard from head coach Dan Quinn. We heard from quarterback Marcus Mariota. Yeah, okay. We're going to talk about that and what that all means. We're going to talk about what was said at the pressers for each individual, and then kind of talk about what that potentially means for the upcoming week. But before we do any of that, you know what we got to do? Let's take a look at the injury report for both teams. Keep in mind, the Raiders are a West Coast team. Their schedule is a lot different than teams on the East Coast. So at the time of this recording, we don't have the Raiders injury report, and it's going to be a little bit clunky all week long because of the nature of them practicing later and their information coming out later than Washington's. We'll probably be a day behind. So tomorrow I'll have the Wednesday injury report, and Thursday injury report will be on the Friday show, and we'll have to speculate as to what we think is going to happen with some of their guys. Also, keep in mind the Raiders played on Monday. They are really dealing with a short week. They're at a real big deficit this week. Are the Raiders? All right. If you recall, I had Warren Sharp on the summer series, and he talked about games lost to rest days and all that stuff, and the deficit that some teams face. This is a massive deficit for the Raiders. The Commanders are coming off of a Thursday night game, so they're going to be rested in that way. And then the Raiders played a Monday night contest and then have to travel all the way across the U.S. to come play the Commanders on the East Coast. So they not only were giving up extra rest days to the Commanders, who were coming off of a Thursday night contest, you add to the fact that they're coming off of a short week, which is also cutting into their rest time. They're at a stark disadvantage. So guys that are banged up probably it's going to be a lot tougher. I won't say probably. It'll be a lot tougher for them to be able to recover for this game. And the Commanders have a ton of rest despite all of the injuries that they do have going into this game. They have an advantage, and hopefully they are able to take full advantage of said advantage. Let's take a look at the injury report for the good guys. And so a lot of DNPs. This is the most DNPs we've seen on an injury report all season long to this point. But the good news is half of the DNPs that you see are all veteran rest days. All right. So John Bates, Noah Brown, and Jayden Daniels are legitimate injuries, guys that did not practice for real reasons. Zach Ertz, Von Miller, and Laramie Tunsil all receiving vet rest days. Nothing wrong with them. They're going to be all systems go for Sunday's Week 3 contest. The rest of this list, and we'll go back and talk about the guys at the top of this list here in a second. Trey Amos, shoulder limited. Remember, he left the game against Green Bay. The touchdown pass, the first one of the game for Green Bay that was thrown, was with Trey Amos out of the game on Mikey Samer still. Don't think that would have happened if Trey Amos would have been in the lineup still. He injured his shoulder actually on the play where Jordan Love ran him over on the sidelines, coincidentally enough. So hopefully he'll be all systems go, because I think we've identified that he's our best corner on the team. I think we felt like that was going to be the case anyway, but to actually see it play itself out in the first 2 weeks, I think there are no doubts in our mind he's our best corner. And so we definitely need him out there. Brandon Coleman's shoulder, he left the game briefly, I think for about 9 snaps on Thursday night. Came back and played. It was not one of his better performances, but he went up against a really talented defensive tackle in Devontae Wyatt. And so I still have the utmost confidence in Brandon Coleman, but this is the second year in a row he's dealt with a shoulder injury. So this may be something that might linger throughout his career. Hopefully he'll be fine, ready to go on Sunday and able to tough this thing out throughout the course of this season. Jeremy McNichols, hamstring, that's a new addition to this injury report, something to keep an eye on, especially being that we're already down a running back. So hopefully Jeremy McNichols is just fine. That's precautionary, and that there's nothing really truly wrong with him. Colson Yankoff, hip, limited. Again, similar conversation to be had here. You're already down one of your tight ends, more likely than not, on Sunday in John Bates. You cannot afford for Colson Yankoff to be out of this game. Again, limited with the hip. They were inside the bubble today because it was nasty outside. It rained all day yesterday. It was raining again today, so they practiced inside. We'll get a better sense of who's what and what's what tomorrow when they hit the grass outside. And now you're really into the full week in swing of things. Hopefully, a lot of these turn out to be non-issues, and this ends up being a less threatening. It's already a threatening injury report because our starting quarterback is on it, and it's a legit thing, not like the one last week where he was on it and it didn't feel real. This is a legit Jayden Daniels injury. Same can be said for John Bates and Noah Brown. So this is a threatening injury report just off the strength of Jayden Daniels' name being on it and it being a legit injury. But it can be less threatening when you take off those 3 vets. And then if you tell me Trey Emmons, Brandon Coleman, Jeremy McNichols, and Colson Yankoff are all good to go, you're just looking at those 3 guys that we already knew were going to be, potential long shots to play. Let's talk about those 3 guys, though. John Bates, groin, and Noah Brown, groin as well, and knee, as you see on that. DQ said in his press conference, and we'll elaborate on this, but he said he feels a lot better about those 2 guys' status, not just for the future, but this week. He feels a lot better about them than he did on Monday when he first told us they were long shots. We'll explain and go into greater detail when we talk about what DQ had to say at his press conference. Jayden Daniels, I'm just going to tell you right now, I told you guys this already. I expect him to play on Sunday. I have not changed the way I feel. This feels like they pulled it straight out of the script from last year's Bears game. They had Marcus Mariota do the Wednesday press conference. Jayden did not practice until Friday. He practiced on Friday. He played on Sunday. Now, I will say this as well, and this is important to note. That was a rib injury. This is a knee injury. The 2 are not the same, and thus they could err on the side of caution here. But I would not be shocked, and I am still, until I am told that he is out of this game, I expect Jayden Daniels to play on Sunday. That is where my head is. And DQ has said nothing, and I mean nothing. We're going to talk more about what was said. He has said nothing to deter me from feeling that way after his press conference today. So that is the injury report brought to you by Sleeper. We're going to talk to I'm going to talk to you now as we go back inside in other news about the press conference itself. DQ spoke for about 15 minutes. Marcus Mariota spoke for just a shade over 10. Let's talk about what was said. So we start with he started with Jonathan Jones and Preston Smith. He had an update. We talked about that already. Preston Smith signed to the active roster. In a corresponding move, Jonathan Jones placed on IR. He'll be out for at least a month, probably a little bit longer. So he talked about that, and then he moved into taking questions from the media. Of course, the first question was going to be Jayden Daniels related, and he basically was asked, what is the update on Jayden Daniels? Where is he at in his process, and, will he be able to play this week? And he said, look, don't know what's his status for this weekend. We're taking it day by day, but he did say that Jayden has to practice at some point this week in order for him to feel comfortable putting him on the field, which is what he told us last year. But he's not going to practice today, probably not going to practice tomorrow. The earliest that he will see practice will be Friday, if he does practice at all this week. And he did say that Jayden was out on the field, moving around, throwing the football today. He had all the mile markers. He looked really good, but he did not practice. He did all of that on the side field. He did all of his rehabbing and all of that. And the thing that makes me confident that he's going to play, and this is the only reason that I keep saying I think he's going to play, is because we played on Thursday. And DQ alluded to that when he talked about Jayden, Noah, and John Bates, is that they had a little bit more time. In a traditional setting, you get hurt on a Sunday, you're going to have to be on the field 7 days later. That's not the case. Jayden and Noah and John Bates and everyone that got injured or is dealing with something had an extra 3 days, right? From Thursday all the way to Sunday. They've got 10 full days of recovery and things they can do to get ready to play. And so I think there's a legitimate shot of Jayden playing on Sunday, and I'm not ruling it out. I'm not one of these people that's, just rest him. It's the Raiders. We can win with Marcus Mariota. Bullshit. I've already said this. If Jayden can play, put him out there. And if they feel comfortable with him playing, put him out there, right? If you don't, and this is the thing, I wholeheartedly trust them to make the right decision, whether that's to sit him or play him. They're going to make the right decision. They're going to make the decision that's not only in the best interest of the team, but more importantly, in the best interest of Jayden Daniels. Like they're going to save him from himself, even if that means telling him you can't play and Jayden thinks he can't, right? So feel good about that. Offensive line play. He was asked about the line. It wasn't good on Thursday. Who are we kidding? We knew that already, though. He said, look, we're all about competition. And he was asked specifically, you're thinking about maybe putting in Wiley at, either tackle or guard. And, of course, he's not going to disclose any of that, but he said, we're always looking to improve and get better. And so, we're exploring all options. And what I heard from him was they're not going to bench the rookie. Don't expect that. But Nick Allegretti, again, he didn't say any names, but Allegretti, and I already told you guys this prior to week 1 when we saw the depth chart going into the season. I said, don't be surprised if Allegretti struggles if they don't turn to Wiley. Now, DQ said, look, we ran the football very effectively in week 1 with this same group. And we think we can continue to do that now. Remember, you might be minus John Bates, and that's a huge part of this. But um, I think he wants to give them another opportunity. That Green Bay defense in a short week was hell to deal with. I think he wants to see this group with full day, 10 days of preparation against a Raiders team, see how they fare there. And if they struggle again, you could see some changes. And again, Max Crosby is the type of guy that could induce changes. We'll see. But it doesn't sound like anything's going to change. But I think their ears are definitely open to maybe making a change if need be. Remember, we're getting ever so close to the prospects of Sam Cosmi being able to come off of IR. So we'll see what happens. Max Crosby, speaking of which, he talked about Max Crosby, talked about his relentless energy. I think anybody that's watched Max Crosby understands what he brings to the table. Relentless energy, a guy that just it puts so much pressure on you. He doesn't have to affect the game from a stats perspective. He impacts the game from an impact perspective. Like, he didn't have a sack against the Chargers, but he was in the backfield. He forced a fumble without even touching the running back, right? He blew into the backfield. The running back didn't even have the ball yet. He looks up. Max Crosby is charging towards him, and he does not secure the football because he's so worried about getting hit. He fumbles the ball. The Raiders recover. Crosby didn't touch him, yet he impacted the play. And that's the kind of impact that Max Crosby can have. DQ also went on to say, in addition to that relentless energy that he plays for and the passion and the zest for the game that he also has tremendous bend and elasticity on that edge, which he does. He's just he plays the game in such a violent manner that you can't help but love Max Crosby. He'd be a great addition to this team because of his play style. That's exactly what DQ and company look for in a player. Max Crosby delivers that on a weekly basis for the Vegas Raiders. He says what to expect from Marcus Mariota should he play, and DQ made sure to add in should he play. Like, that's not a guarantee that he's going to play, but should he play? He said, we know what to expect from Marcus. He's a pro. A lot of the things that we run with Jayden, we can run with Marcus. Their styles are very similar. And so we know what Marcus can go out there and do. We know his capabilities. You saw what he did last year when he was pressed into action, and we expect nothing less from him. He steps in there. We expect him to play at a very high level. And he's got the support of his teammates. And we know he'll be ready if called upon. And that's the beauty of having a veteran backup quarterback like Marcus Mariota. Talked about his Pete Carroll relationship. He said, look, I've coached against him numerous times throughout my career now. So it's not like, the first time going up against your mentor, right? And you're the pupil, you're the understudy. And now you like Ben Johnson just did against Dan Campbell. He's like, I've coached against him a number of times, but he just went through their relationship again, how Pete instilled confidence in him, how he gave him a shot. He was the defensive line coach. He went to Florida for 2 years. Pete brought him back as the defensive coordinator, and that's what helped propel him to getting the job in Atlanta, etc. So he's talked about Pete, and you can see the relationship, or you can see Pete's ideology rub off on, and how it's rub off on DQ, because the way DQ treats people, the way DQ goes about his business, it's very Pete Carroll like. He talked about ball is life, and unfortunately, it hasn't been here. And he talked about the Giants game and how they were close to getting a turnover, and how Quan got his hands on one, but it was negated due to penalty. But then he said against the Packers, we weren't even close. We weren't even close to creating a turnover, and that has to change. And he said it's a mentality, it's a mindset, and we got to be more aggressive attacking the football. We'll see if that happens. I already told you, ball is not life in these parts. But if ball can't be life on Sunday, when can ball ever be life, right? Adversity. He talked about it because we saw this team go through a little bit of adversity on Thursday, right? That was not a, commander-like performance. That's not what we're accustomed to seeing from this team. And even in the face of that adversity, DQ was like, the guys never quit. which I told everybody in the mob, shout out to the mob, we were live during the game, and I said, we're not getting blown out of this game. I said, this next drive will tell me all I need to know. And we went down the field, and we got a field goal. And so I said, we're not getting blown out of this game. We're going to be in this ball game. And I expect this team to fight to the very bitter end. And they did. Even though it felt like a bigger discrepancy on the scoreboard, it wasn't. This was a 17-10 game late stages of the third quarter. As bad as we had played, we fought our asses off, and we were right there. So when you look at this game or you look at the adversity, DQ said, this team is mentally tough, and adversity is going to hit. He said, we talk about it all the time. Adversity is going to hit, and you got to be prepared. And he feels like this team is handling that loss well, and they're ready. He said, I was so sick of just stewing in that loss. I was ready to get back on the practice field. I said the same thing yesterday, did I not? I'm so sick of wearing black. I had the black backdrop. I had the all black on. I was like, I'm so sick of just stewing in this loss and wearing all this black, because from Thursday to Tuesday feels like an eternity. That's why winning is so important on those Thursday night games, because it feels like shit for like 5 days straight. So glad that that's behind us. I can be back in color again. And DQ said it just felt good to be back on the practice field. Put that shit behind us. Let's start anew, and let's try to turn the page there and get to a new chapter. He talked about helping with defensive communication during practice, and he said it really just stems from competition. Going out, competing against one another. He said, you're not able to do that on a short week, so we weren't able to do that against Green Bay last week going into the game. But he said this week, we did it going into the week 1 game against the Giants. We're going to do it again this week, where you got good on good, and it's not scripted. It's not, scout team, get out there, run this play. This is what the Raiders do. It's, hey, first team defense, first team offense. Y'all get out there. Y'all go at it. And it's unscripted. You guys got to communicate on the fly, and let's see how this goes, right? So that helps with communication. He talked about Chase Edmonds, the newest addition at the running back position, added to the practice squad, has history with Cliff Kingsbury, and he was asked straight up, is this guy just here for, insurance purposes should something else happen at the running back position, or do you guys have a plan for him to actually be impactful and be on the field? And he was like, no, we got a plan for this dude. And I think I mentioned this to you guys when we signed him. I said, give him about 3 weeks. That's what I think I told you guys. Give him about 3 weeks. I think they're going to get him out there, and he's going to be the new Austin Eckler, because that's his game. If you've never been introduced to Chase Edmonds, he's a really good football player. And so DQ said, no, we got a plan for him. And, the good thing is he already knows the offense. Cliff is very comfortable with him, knows his skill set. And now we just got to get him acclimated and up to speed. But he said that should take about 3 weeks or so. And we got a plan for him. I said, okay. And he talked about all the other running backs, basically, singled out C-Rod and said, hey, but C-Rod's going to get an opportunity and all that good stuff. But again, if they're going to keep 3 guys active at the running back position, you already know which one's going to be the guy that's going to end up being brought down. So something to keep in mind as we move forward. Chris Rodriguez, like he always does, needs to make the most of his opportunities to show that he needs to be here no matter what happens moving forward. Going to be tough, though, if they only have 3 active running backs. Somebody's got to go. But in the meantime, C-Rod's going to get his opportunity. He talked about Noah Brown and John Bates, gave updates on those guys. And what I found interesting was I told you what he said already, that those 2 guys, he's a little bit more encouraged by what they were able to do today than he was Monday when he first told us that they were long shots to play this week against the Raiders. He's not singing that same tune. He's like, hey, hold on now. Saw these guys work out today. And if you listen to John Bates, and again, you can't listen to players when it comes to injuries. They'll always tell you they're fine. But he was on with JP Finley. He didn't sound like a guy that was going to miss a lot of time, if any, right? But again, I after Darius Geis told me and told all of us he was fine with a lollipop in his mouth after the Patriots game, and then 2 seconds later we found out this man tore his ACL, I don't believe players anymore, okay? So Noah Brown and John Bates aren't out of this game as of right now. I still don't think either one of them play on Sunday. But I think both could be back as soon as next week on the road in Atlanta. But DQ was like, hey, hold on. both of them looked a lot better than I thought they were going to look. And I'm not so sure about them, being back soon, later. It might be sooner rather than later. It felt like later, might be sooner rather than later. So that's a great update for both of those two. Same with Jayden as well. Then he gave an assessment of the Raiders. He talked about them on the defensive side, talked about Max Crosby, talked about Malcolm Kuntz, the two defensive ends, talked about their linebackers, their veteran guys there, and then he talked about the offensive side. They got a ton of speed. Obviously, they got Genty and Geno. He talked about Geno and what he brings to the table and all the threats that he poses. And then he talked about all the speed they got at receiver, which they got a ton of speed at receiver. Where you talking about Trey Tucker, or you're talking about the kid from Tennessee that they took in the 3rd round, Dante Thornton Jr. They got guys that can flat out fly. So, we saw a guy that could flat out fly on Thursday, and he ran right past our defense. Right past our defense, like we were standing still. Luckily enough for us, that ball was overthrown. So they do scare me from that standpoint about us staying on top of these guys and not letting them get vertical on this defense and take the top off. But they know what they're up against, and I expect them to be prepared for this Raiders offense. Then you heard from Marcus Mariota, and he talked about staying ready and his confidence, and he talked about the team having confidence in him, and that gives him the confidence to go out and play well. He said he prepares every single week as if his number is going to be called, because you just never know. We saw that twice last year. He probably knew he was going to play against Dallas at some point in that regular season finale, but he had no idea he was going to play against the Panthers last year. But he stepped in, and remember, he was a little rusty. We were talking all kinds of shit. I know I was guilty as charged, talking all types of shit about Marcus, and then it finally clicked, and then they couldn't stop him after that, right? He talked about, how the game plan changes with him being in and not Jayden potentially. And he's like, it really doesn't. He said that's the beauty of our quarterback room, is that all of us can run essentially the same plays. I don't think 39-year-old Josh Johnson is going to run what Marcus and Jayden can run, but once upon a time he was capable of doing that. But not a lot has to change between the two of them, Jayden and Marcus, because of their very similar skill sets. So that's a good thing. And he said ultimately, if there's some things in there that I don't like, I can talk to Cliff. He'll take it out, or Cliff will ask me, what do I like? And I'll give him those things, and they'll implement it. So he's like, I love the no-huddle tempo of this offense. It fits my skill set, fits what I'm used to, when I was in Oregon. And so I just love the tempo, love Cliff, love that he puts guys in the best positions to succeed. And that also goes for Marcus himself. How he talked about how he feels, and he was like, he just needed to rest in the summer, right? Once the Achilles thing started to flare up, he said he appreciates the team not rushing him, not forcing him to do anything, just allowing him to rest, allowing it to heal. And now he feels great, and he's ready to go out there. And should his number be called on Sunday, he feels like he will be ready. He talked about the Raiders. Remember, a lot of people are trying to are trying to put this revenge game narrative on him. Most of the guys that he was there with in Vegas aren't there anymore. And it's not like his time in Vegas was trash or anything like that, but they did do him dirty, right? In terms of a contract situation, but that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is, he talked about Max Crosby. He was his teammate in Vegas, so he knows about Max. He talked about Devin White. He brought up Devin White, and he said, and a lot of people are giving Devin White some love because he's playing like a madman. And we all know the dude is super talented, and he's still relatively young by NFL standards, but he's just not been able to figure it out in a number of different places. And he seems to be very comfortable in Vegas, and he's flying around making plays. And then he mentioned Caillou Blue Kelly, who was here with us last year, if you recall, in the preseason. And he actually has been making some plays. I don't know if you guys have watched the Raiders, but he's out there playing with some confidence on the boundary. So he brought up all of those guys, talked about, the Raiders and some of the threats they pose defensively, and, how we got to be on our P's and Q's, Y's and Z's. He talked about the gratitude that he has for playing. Like, don't take it for granted. You never know when you're going to get another chance. And he's so excited, for the opportunity, should it come this Sunday or if it ever comes again. He's just happy to be in the building with this particular group. And he stressed that throughout this press conference, that he just loves this team, loves the environment, and he loves the brotherhood. He talked about his advice to Jayden. And I thought this was really interesting because Marcus has been in this situation numerous times before. He's actually talked about this in the past about, I think he talked about it last year, as a matter of fact, going into that Bears game, right? Where he basically told Jayden, like, hey, um, and I'll just squeeze in the communication piece here too, because they asked, have you been in communication with Jayden? He's like, yeah, all the time. Like, Jayden's in all the meetings. We talk all the time. He's like, we're such a close-knit group in that quarterback room. And he said, I told Jayden, look, if you can go and be yourself, like the best version of yourself, yo, get out there and cut it loose. Go be you, right? He said, we always tell you, tell guys, go be you, right? And he said that um, if you can't do the things that you are accustomed to doing, he said, because we're all competitive, we're warriors, we want to go out there and tough it out for our guys. But if you can't go out there and be yourself, then that's when you maybe need to just take a week off, and I could take care of it for you. But if you can do it and you feel great and there are no limitations, go out there and be you, bruh. And I think that's how the team's going to handle it, honestly. Um, Talked about his relationship with Cliff and playing well last year, and he just said it's everything I already told you. Basically, Cliff put him in a great position to succeed. The tempo is great. The communication between them is awesome, and so I think that's just where he is with that. He talked about handling losses, and he said the same thing I basically said, which was that Thursday shit is the worst because you just want to get back on the practice field as a player and get that bad taste out of your mouth and start anew and work on a new game plan and try to rectify the things that you did wrong the week before. And when you lose on a Thursday, it just lingers. And he's like, we got to listen to everybody talk about what we didn't do and this, that, and the third. And so, yeah, I'm just so glad we can finally put that Packers game behind us. And he talked about getting the bulk of the reps on the practice field, getting back on the practice field, and that's a big thing. Then he talked about the fine line between being a playmaker and a runner as a quarterback, because that's a big part of his game. It's a big part of Jayden's game, and he said you gotta be able to figure out that healthy balance. You can't neuter a guy like Jayden or even Marcus to the point where they're not themselves, but you also have to be careful about how you attack the football field and certain plays and certain instances during the game, because again, your team needs you and your health is of the utmost importance. It's paramount, and so you have to be able to strike that balance between this is an important play, go for it, and hey, it's early in the game, it's not that big of a deal, slide, get out of bounds, whatever. So all of that stuff comes into play, and that was essentially Marcus Mariota's press conference. It was a good one. Looking forward to him playing if he has to, but I still think this is a Jayden Daniels week when it's all said and done. Let's get a word from our sponsor, Sleeper. We'll come back on the other side. We'll go and take our first look at the game on Sunday versus the Vegas Raiders, and then we'll get out of here. Sleeper. Sleeper is the best way to experience and connect over sports together. It's a one-stop shop for all of your sports needs. You can celebrate and chat in the games in real time with other users, get the fastest scores, blazing fast news and alerts right at your fingertips. Play in fantasy leagues and win real money on picks contests. So enjoy sports the way they were meant to, together. Download the #1 sports app today. Predict the hottest football stats like passing yards, receiving yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and much more to cash in on your daily fantasy football skills. Use promo code LTN, and Sleeper will match your first deposit up to $100. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. Sleeper. So let's take our first look at the game on Sunday versus the Las Vegas Raiders. I talked about this at the top of the show. The Raiders are coming into this game at a rest deficit, right? They played on a Monday. We played on a Thursday. We have all this extra time off. Not only did they play on a Monday, which already put them at a deficit, we played on a Thursday to add to that. Now they got to make a cross-country trip all the way on the East Coast. So they're at a extreme deficit here in week number 3. So the thought process is we have to take full advantage of this. They did not play well on Monday. If you watched that game, they struggled mightily. It felt a lot like when we played the Giants in week 1. It was a divisional contest. These two teams know each other, but still, the Chargers were the superior team. They dominated them with their defense, but they didn't put up a bunch of points, and they left a lot out on the field, and that game was a lot closer on the scoreboard than the actual play indicated. Now, unlike when we played the Giants, they forced turnovers at the Chargers, right? Geno Smith threw 3 interceptions. I thought that they should have utilized Genty a lot more because he had it going. He struggled mightily in week 1 against the Patriots running the football. I thought he was running the ball extremely well. So to me, the first thing that I look at in this game when we talk about the Raiders is I talk about this every week. You got to stop the run. You got to stop the run. But it's paramount this week because look, Chip Kelly isn't going to run the football a ton. I just don't feel like that's who he is at his core. But I think Pete Carroll is a guy that wants to run the football. That's his MO. That's who he's been throughout his career. And I think after watching how things went down in week 2 on Monday against the Chargers, he's going to tell Chip Kelly, I need you to put an emphasis on running the ball. Genty needs to touch it more. And I expect them to come out with a game plan where Genty is the focal point of that thing. If we can shut him down and force Geno Smith to have to beat us, again, I'll take my chances with that versus Genty getting his shit off. Now play action fake becomes a thing. Now they can take shots down the field. Now we're giving up big plays. I want to see us do what we did in week 1, shut the run game off, completely turn that faucet off, force the quarterback to have to beat us, and then get after the quarterback, right? And Geno's one of those guys like Russell Wilson. He ain't running nowhere. He can be sacked 4 or 5 times. And unlike Russell, who didn't put the ball really in harm's way, Geno will put that bitch in harm's way if you pressure him. He will make a mistake or 2 or 3, as we saw Monday. So for me, that is the big emphasis. You have to stop Genty, which will allow you to get after Geno. Geno will put the ball in harm's way, but you got to get to him. If Geno gets into a rhythm, look out. I know a lot of people think Geno Smith is trash. Geno Smith led the NFL in completion percentage last year, and it wasn't dink and dunkers, right? Geno can stroke that thing, pause, if you allow him to stand back there and have time. And he's got receivers, and we know about Brock Bowers. I don't have to tell you, after watching what Tucker Kraft just did to us, I don't have to tell you the threat that a guy like Brock Bowers poses to this defense. So I'm scared out of my mind. I'm scared shitless at the fact that we got to go up against Brock Bowers, right? So then you turn it to the offensive side for the Washington Commanders in this game. And look, it's as simple as this. If you can establish the run, which I think you can establish the run against the Raiders. Now, they haven't given up a ton of yards on the ground, but they can't cover in space, right? The Patriots were able to throw the football and have some success, but not as much as, Justin Herbert did. Justin Herbert was able to really shred them through the air. A lot of quick passes to guys like Keenan Allen and L.A.B. McConkey, and then they hit the big one over the top to QJ, Quentin Johnston, and they moved the ball consistently. They just weren't able to finish and complete drives. If you can establish the run, which I didn't think the Chargers did well enough in the game, and that'll allow you to have the space to be able to, like Max Crosby is a problem. Who are we kidding? But if you can neutralize Max Crosby, you should have opportunities to do what you need to do through the air in the pass game against this Raiders defense, and you should be able to move the football. You should be able to extend drives. You should be able to convert third down, something that we really haven't done well this season. We did it really well last season, haven't done it that well this season. So there's a lot of different moving parts, but the ultimate goal is neutralize Max Crosby and everything else will fall into place, So we'll talk more about the Raiders. We'll go behind enemy lines tomorrow. We'll have a even broader discussion about them and what needs to be done in order for the Commanders to be victorious in this game on Thursday. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on Commanders Nightly News. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys tomorrow. Until then, I'm your man Louie T, signing off. You guys have a good one. Take care.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap, hand to Riggins. Good hole. He's got the first down.